episodes, I've covered the internal family systems approach to therapy, what it involves, the groups of parts, and their characteristics at their best and at their worst, and also how we can access these parts, how we can get in touch with them. And in this video, I want to talk about the inner parts work and what it involves, how you can use it, as well as more on the concept of self and how can we know when we are in self. Inner parts work in IFS invites people to take time to introduce the parts to the self. By now you know what the self is. Most of the time we only know our parts through our other parts. A part of me gets angry at another part of me that eats too much or drinks too much. A part of me gets anxious when another part of me works too much. A part of me gets frustrated when another part of me forgets to take out the trash or stays up late at night, or when my partner neglects me, and so on and so forth. But when do I take the time to find out why a part of me works too much in the first place? Or when do I take the time to find out why a part of me eats too much? And when do I take the time to find out why a part of me forgets to take out the trash or decides to stay late? Usually I just side with the part that criticizes these parts. In the real life, with real people, criticizing people for eating too much doesn't help them stop. But listening to them and hearing about the stress that drives them to eat can help them find better ways to relieve that stress. Getting upset when a spouse works too much doesn't solve the problem, but taking the time to listen to why, help them come up with solutions, just might result in some. In the external world, the best results happen when we approach others from ourselves, a place of interest and care. The same happens in our internal world. When we approach our parts with respect and consideration, instead of trying to bypass their resistance or coerce them into compliance, we start building trust with them. A side benefit of practicing this type of inner work is that the way we treat our parts also carries over to the way we treat other people in the outside world. There are two layers to the inner parts work. First is mapping out the parts around a particular issue. That is, identifying the parts involved and getting to know them from the self with curiosity and openness. What we usually discover is that these parts have been working hard to protect another vulnerable part. Extending them appreciation and understanding for their effort, even if imperfect, helps them relax. Once we befriend and build trust with these protectors, we can negotiate permission to help with the exiled parts that they are protecting. This is an important step because trying to bypass these protectors without their permission or siding up with one against the other will often backfire. They will come back with a vengeance, as Dick Schwartz says, doubling down on their effort. The second layer is the deeper work of healing the exiles. Once we get permission to get to them, the exiled parts have been pushed away because they either hold painful emotions, are regarded as weak, or were simply not accepted in the family or society. For example, being playful and carefree as a child was seen as being too much or even dangerous by a parent who was struggling with depression, perhaps. So there is a sequence of steps when working with these exiles. First and foremost, they are met and held with compassion and love from the core self, especially as they relate to their stories. When they are witnessed in such a way in their distress, this has a healing effect, transforming those experiences. In the midst of it, they are offered the chance to have the self step in and do or be for them in whatever way they needed someone to be there for them back then. This changes that experience, and this is how memory reconsolidation happens, as discussed in a previous video on healing. You might think, how can this work? It's just the imagination. Well, it looks like the brain does not differentiate between the real or imagined. Brain imaging shows that the same parts of the brain activate when we imagine things as when we recall things. And experiments where false memories have been planted in people's minds resulted in people actually describing and believing them as real. This is a bit scary. It is believed to have something to do with the correlation between episodic memory and our ability to imagine the future. In cases when the brain areas responsible for episodic memory were damaged as a result of an accident, those people were not able to imagine what they will do tomorrow. As we imagine things, it seems our brain toggles back and forth between future envisioning and memories of the past. Does it make sense? In any case, it works. That being said, another thing is that having someone in times of traumatic events that can offer comfort and support is actually known to mitigate against trauma and form resilience. An example comes to mind. A child was bullied at school and feared for her life. The bullies promised to wait for her around the corner and beat her up for something she didn't even do. She managed to get home, but there is no one available to talk to because they just found out grandma passed away. Fast forward to now. As an adult, she finds herself overwhelmed with a work situation. When working with that part, the memories it brings up is that scenario from childhood and that sense of fear for life. The tiger lurking in the shadows, which is not really a tiger, but it sure feels like one. If this child were given compassionate care and support back then, that experience would not have registered as traumatic, eliciting that kind of response today. However, connecting to those parts now still allows the opportunity to offer that care and compassion retroactively. Next, once these parts are witnessed, they are invited to go to a safe place of their choosing and unload all of those intense feelings and misguided beliefs they've been holding all this time. Through the 4 elements, or through light, or to God, the part will decide. And take in other qualities. Then, once this happens, we invite in the protector parts to come in and see this exile part now. And that they don't need to protect the system in such a way anymore. Because these protectors are often tired of their roles, they are happy to go relax somewhere or take upon more positive, lighter roles, or just their natural roles to begin with. The parts know now they can trust the self and let this self-energy run through them, leading to a self-led system. While this way of getting to know your parts can be done by anyone as a form of self-therapy or a form of relating to yourself, working with the exiled parts on your own can be harder, so it's recommended to do it with a therapist. How can you know when you're in self? A phrase you will hear among IFS enthusiasts is being in self. And the question many ponder is, how in the world can you know when you're in self? Especially because there are also the self-like parts. Self already exists in everyone. It is present at birth, distinct from parts. It is our being that is free of ego. Self is the seat of consciousness of who we are and has these qualities of a natural leader, as discussed previously. It is the place from which we can watch, observe, experience, and be with our parts and others in an easy and relaxed way. When we acknowledge it and come from ourselves, we experience those 8 C qualities or states, such as calmness, curiosity, connectedness, confidence, courage, presence, playfulness, patience. When you consider people you feel supported by, they probably show a lot of these self qualities. Different people experience self differently. Not everyone experiences every quality of the self. nor do they experience the qualities in the same way. When in doubt, the easiest way to check if you are in self is to ask yourself, how do I feel towards this part of me, this emotion, or this situation? So let's say you want to focus on a part that seems very present through a feeling or a body sensation or an emotion. You ask this question, how do I feel towards this part of me? If you do not feel one of those C qualities, most likely you are in another part or another part is present. What you do is you ask the other part to soften back, give you some space, and then keep asking the question, how do I feel now towards this part? This process is called unblending, creating a space between the self and the parts. Eventually, you'll find all the parts, and once you found them all, self is what is left. There are some practices that help parts unblend and access more of this self energy, such as meditation, prayer, going for a walk or running in nature, a hot shower, listening to music. In all, self is the zest of life and thriving, the core of our inherent worth, apart from any achievement. And that is enough. It's our essence of pure love and life, the divine essence in us. In conclusion, why is this work important? Because it's our burden protectors that limit us in many ways and hurt us in the long run. And it's our protectors that hurt others, especially the closest ones. IFS has proven truly transformational and very effective at helping these burdened parts. And it might be just the way to help you so you can thrive, pursue your dreams with courage, and be fulfilled no matter what. There are a ton of subtleties in this work, the parts and their various configurations, as well as their legacies and the gifts they carry. I find it fascinating, and it's fun looking at various topics through these lenses. Next, I will review the Netflix You series that I watched recently because it is awfully in line with this work. So, what are your thoughts on it all? Thank you for listening. If you find this useful, please share it with others. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and keep the hope alive.